The emergency signal had come in unexpectedly, interrupting the otherwise monotonous hum of the Vanguard, humanity's last standing flagship in the frontier space of the outer colonies. The ship, built from the remnants of Earth's once proud fleet, was currently stationed at the edge of the system of Arx 12, a planet so hostile and forgotten by the rest of the galaxy that even its name was little more than a footnote in history. Incoming signal, Commander, called Alina Yu from her station, her voice tight with a mixture of disbelief and concern. She was a scientist by training, a diplomat by necessity, and the last person you'd expect to find at the tactical console. But given the circumstances, she'd learned how to handle a few things on the bridge, not least of which was this: the unexpected. Jace Hamilton, commander of the Vanguard and of humanity's precarious holdings in this corner of the galaxy, snapped his gaze to the readout on the console. The signal was weak, distorted, and ancient-sounding, faint, like an echo from another time. But one thing stood out. It was human. "Is it a mistake?" Jace asked, rubbing a hand across his tired face. "A glitch in the system? Maybe an old message." He was too weary, too experienced to hope for anything else. They couldn't afford any more distractions, especially not in a system where every moment of peace was fragile. "No, sir," Alina answered quickly, the tension in her voice betraying the seriousness of the moment. She leaned in closer, her fingers tapping at the console's keys with growing urgency. "It's an active distress signal coming from a colony on Arx 12. The message is human." Jace stiffened, feeling an old, bitter twinge of something deep in his gut. Arx 12 wasn't just any colony. It was one of the first human outposts to be abandoned after the war with the Varkari, an alien empire known for its relentless military campaigns and cruel cultural philosophy. Humanity had learned the hard way that the Varkari didn't just conquer, they annihilated. But Arx 12 had been long forgotten, deemed unsalvageable by every government after the war. Humanity had moved on, even as the Varkari's war machine ground on through the galaxy. He stepped toward the console, watching the readout intently. "Confirm that message, Alina. I want to know who's sending this." Alina's fingers hesitated for a moment before she confirmed the origin of the signal. "It's coming from the Reclamation Colony. It's definitely from humans, Commander. But there's something off about it. I've never seen anything like this." Jace's heart skipped a beat. The Reclamation Colony, the last outpost of humanity on Arx 12, a forgotten relic of the past. They'd barely lasted 2 years against the Varkari's advance before being overrun. The galaxy had written them off long ago. The last human to step foot on Arx 12 was probably dead. So, why was this message reaching them now? "What do they want?" Jace asked, his voice suddenly far quieter than he'd intended. The weight of the decision ahead of him pressed down on his shoulders. "It's a standard distress signal," Alina said, eyes scanning the incoming transmission. Her brow furrowed. "But there's a request for immediate evacuation, and something else." Jace didn't need to ask what something else meant. He'd been in enough battles to know the look of desperation in a man's eyes. He glanced at Alina, seeing her troubled expression. "Tell me." The message says, and I quote, "To all who hear this, we are the last survivors of the Reclamation Colony on Arx 12. The Varkari have destroyed our defenses. Our supplies are gone. We are surrounded, and we will not last much longer. We send this message as a final plea. Please, someone help us. We are humans. We will fight to the end." Jace's fists clenched. The words echoed in his mind. "We will fight to the end." It was both a declaration and a final act of defiance. The humans on Arx 12 weren't asking for mercy. They weren't pleading for rescue, like some frightened refugees. No, they were asking for help because they had no other choice. And they were promising to fight, even in the face of death. He turned away from the console, his thoughts racing. The Varkari had surely already found them. If not, they would be there soon. Arx 12 was little more than a barren, broken wasteland. There was no hiding from the Varkari, no retreating into safe havens. The only option left was a headlong charge into battle. The door to the bridge slid open, and Captain Marcus Vance, the fleet's tactical officer, stepped in, his face set in a hard line. He had a reputation for being cool under pressure, a man who could think on his feet even when the universe seemed bent on tearing everything apart. "I've been monitoring the signal," Vance said, walking up beside Jace. His voice was low, but there was no mistaking the concern in it. "The Valkyrie will be here within hours. This is a death sentence. Sending a fleet in would be suicide." Jace met his gaze. "I'm aware. But we don't leave our people behind, Marcus. That's not who we are." Vance's eyes flickered briefly to the tactical readouts on the console before returning to Jace. He knew better than anyone the risks they were facing. The Valkyrie didn't just obliterate their enemies, they made examples of them. Entire populations vanished overnight, reduced to dust and forgotten by the universe. "If we send a fleet, it will be a one-way trip," Vance warned. "Even if we make it there in time, we're no match for the Valkyrie's main fleet. They'll wipe us out." Jace nodded. "I know. But what's the alternative? Let them die out there alone? We've done that before. We can't do it again." Alina, her face drawn tight with concern, added softly, "Commander, this may be a trap. The Valkyrie could be using this signal to lure us in. Or it could be a tactic to isolate us, to make us too vulnerable for counterattack. They're ruthless. They'll do anything." Jace's mind churned with possibilities. But the more he thought about it, the clearer his decision became. Humanity had always fought when it mattered most. The Reclamation Colony was humanity's last stand on that forsaken world, and they weren't alone. Jace's hand clenched into a fist. "We're going in," he said, his voice firm. Alina's eyes widened. "Commander, you can't be serious. This is a suicide mission." "I am serious, Alina," he said, his voice unwavering. "We're going to save them. We'll hit the Valkyrie fast and hard before they can bring in reinforcements. The moment we send a fleet, we'll be committing to a full-scale battle. But it's the only way." Vance sighed, his shoulders sagging for a moment. "Then I'll get the fleet ready. But if we're going in, we need to be quick. We have no margin for error." Alina looked between them both, her expression torn. "I'll prepare the message. We need to warn Earth. If we can't make it back..." Jace's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "We'll make it back. We always do." Jace walked to the front of the bridge, standing with his hands clasped behind his back, staring out into the cold, dark void of space. The Vanguard would launch within the hour. His heart was heavy, but his resolve was clear. There was no turning back now. Humanity had been through worse. They could do this. They had to. The message had been sent. And now it was time for humanity to answer. The Vanguard tore through the black void of space, its engines roaring to life as the fleet slipped from the shadow of Arx 12's barren moon. The gravity wells and ion storms that had once shielded the planet from unwanted attention were no longer enough to deter those with the courage to face what lay beyond. A single human fleet, small but determined, was heading straight into the heart of enemy territory, straight into the jaws of the Valkyrie war machine. Commander Jace Hamilton stood at the front of the bridge, his eyes fixed on the endless stars. The anticipation in the air was thick, almost palpable, and the soft hum of the Vanguard's engines was the only sound that broke the silence. The ship's systems were running at full capacity, each member of the crew focused on their tasks. Every last person knew what was at stake, and there was no room for second-guessing. Behind him, Captain Marcus Vance approached, his expression grim. "We're entering the Arx 12 system. The Valkyrie fleet is still unaccounted for, but it's only a matter of time before they arrive. We've got less than an hour. Set a course for the colony," Jace ordered, his voice steady. "Once we're in range, we'll drop out of FTL and assess the situation. I don't want to waste any time." Marcus nodded, his fingers flying across the console, quickly plotting their trajectory. "Understood, Commander. We'll be in range soon." Alina Yu, still managing the ship's communications, looked over her shoulder. "Commander, I've been scanning for any signs of the Valkyrie. There's nothing yet, but the moment they detect us, we'll be in their sights." Jace felt the weight of her words. It was true. The Valkyrie didn't play by the same rules as other species. They were brutal, efficient, and relentless. If the Valkyrie realized they were being hunted, they would call in reinforcements without hesitation. And that would be the end of it. "We need to make it fast," Jace said, his mind racing through tactical options. "Once we drop out of FTL, we won't have long before the Valkyrie arrive. We'll have to hit them hard, no hesitation." Alina's voice broke through the tension. "There's another issue, Commander. The colony's comms are offline. They sent the distress signal, but we haven't heard from them since. If we make it to the surface, we might not even find any survivors." Jace closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. He had already accepted that the colony survivors were likely few, if any. The Valkyrie were masters of siege tactics, but he couldn't bring himself to turn back now. Not when the last vestige of humanity was still holding on by a thread. He would not let them die alone. "Just get us there," Jace said finally. "Once we land, we'll adapt to whatever we find." Less than an hour later, the Vanguard dropped out of FTL, a huge jolt that made the crew brace against their seats. For a moment, the emptiness of space felt even more suffocating, as if the vastness itself were closing in around them. The planet Arx 12, a desolate wasteland of craters and scorched earth, loomed in the viewport like a silent graveyard. Its atmosphere was thin, barely enough to sustain life. The fleet sensors were alive, scanning for any signs of the Valkyrie fleet. The tension in the air was so thick that Jace could feel it pressing against his chest. "Do we have eyes on the colony yet?" Jace asked, turning to Alina. Alina was furiously scanning her screens, fingers tapping rapidly. "I've got a weak signal coming from the surface, Commander, but I can't make out anything specific yet. I'm routing it through the relay." Jace's heart sank as he waited for the connection to stabilize. Every second that passed meant more time for the Valkyrie to close in. Finally, the screen flickered to life, showing the image of a rundown facility, surrounded by crumbled walls and scorch marks. There were no signs of life. No movement. "Nothing's left," Marcus muttered, his voice tight with frustration. "This place has been gutted." Jace clenched his fists. "Keep looking. There has to be something." Alina's face lit up as the signal came through, clearer this time. "There. It's coming from the colony's central command. It's a distress beacon, still active." "Where are the survivors?" Jace asked urgently. "Can't tell from here, sir. We'll need to deploy a ground team to confirm," she replied. Jace nodded. "Prepare the landing crafts. We're going down." The Vanguard's landing crafts descended through the thick, toxic atmosphere of Arx 12, the storm clouds swirling around them as if trying to keep them out. The planet's surface was a war zone, a reminder of the conflict that had devastated it. What had once been a thriving human colony was now little more than a ruin. Scattered debris and twisted metal were all that remained of the colony's defenses. The craft touched down with a harsh thud, sending a jolt through the crew. The doors hissed open, revealing a desolate landscape of craters and wreckage. The air was thick and acrid, smelling of burned metal and scorched earth. The faint hum of the colony's emergency beacons was the only sound that filled the silence. Jace led the way, his boots crunching against the shattered ground as he moved toward the colony's central command. His pulse quickened with each step. He was used to danger, used to the chaos of battle, but this was different. This wasn't a battlefield. This was a graveyard. Alina, Marcus, and a small squad of Marines followed close behind. The Marines were armed and alert, weapons at the ready, scanning for any signs of danger. The rest of the colony might be dead, but there was always a chance, just a chance, that some survivors were hiding, waiting for help. As they approached the central command building, the air seemed to grow colder, and a sense of dread settled over the group. The walls of the building were battered and broken, yet the emergency lights still flickered weakly inside. Jace's stomach twisted. It was a haunting sight, the remnants of humanity's struggle. Whatever had happened here had been brutal. "Stay sharp," Jace ordered, his voice low. "We don't know what we'll find inside." They entered cautiously, moving through the darkened corridors of the facility. The emergency lights barely illuminated the path, casting eerie shadows along the walls. The air inside was still, almost too still, and the only sounds were the soft clicks of their boots against the floor. As they reached the central control room, the door slid open with a hiss. Inside, the sight was worse than Jace had feared. The room was littered with debris, broken consoles, scattered papers, and the remnants of human technology. In the center of the room, a single figure lay slumped against a wall, its face obscured by a helmet. Jace rushed forward, kneeling beside the body. His heart pounded in his chest as he flipped the helmet over, revealing the face of a young officer, barely out of their 20s. But there was no time to grieve. They needed answers. "This one's been dead for hours, maybe more," Alina observed, her voice hollow. She moved past Jace to scan the room for more signs of life. "What happened here?" Marcus muttered under his breath, his face drawn tight in anger. "Who did this?" "The Varkari," Jace replied, his voice tight. "They were here. This colony was one of their last targets." Suddenly, a soft beep interrupted the silence, a signal coming from the wall-mounted terminal. It flickered to life, displaying a message. Jace stepped forward, reading it with a chill running down his spine. It was a warning, but it wasn't for them. The message was from a Varkari commander, boasting about their victory. It wasn't the words that haunted Jace. It was the final line. "Humanity's fire has been snuffed out. The rest will fall before us." Jace's hands clenched, his eyes burning with fury. The Varkari would pay for this. Humanity would make them pay. As the team gathered to leave, Jace's mind raced with what they had learned. The Varkari were already too close. But even with the odds stacked against them, the war wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The survivors of ARCS 12 had shown humanity one thing: the fire of the human spirit couldn't be extinguished that easily. "We've lost the battle here," Jace muttered to himself, the weight of the loss settling in. "But we haven't lost the war." And somewhere, deep inside, he knew that the Varkari had just made the greatest mistake of their lives. The cold silence of the wasteland stretched out across ARCS 12, the remnants of humanity's struggle scattered across the cracked and scorched surface like forgotten ruins. The faint, eerie glow of the emergency beacons was the only reminder that this place had once been a thriving colony. Now it was a tomb. Commander Jace Hamilton and his team stood outside the Central Command facility, their faces grim and hardened by the weight of the discovery inside. The last vestige of humanity on ARCS 12 had fallen, and yet they had not gone quietly. The body of the young officer they had found, a lone survivor who had held on until the very end, was a testament to their resilience. But now, Jace's thoughts weren't on the dead. They were on the living. The survivors who had sent out the distress signal, the ones who had fought to the last moment, and the one spark of hope that remained. The Varkari were already here, and if they wanted to save humanity from annihilation, Jace knew that he had to do something. Something radical. "Commander," Captain Marcus Vance's voice broke through his thoughts. "We've done what we can here. We should regroup and head back to the Vanguard. We're exposed out here." Jace turned to face him, his expression resolute. "We're not going back yet, Marcus." "What do you mean?" Vance asked, a touch of disbelief creeping into his tone. "The Varkari are already on our tail. If we don't pull back, we'll be caught in the crossfire." "We're not retreating," Jace replied firmly. "Not while there's a chance. We know they're coming for us, and we know they'll wipe us out if we don't strike first." Alina Yu, who had been silently observing the scene, stepped forward. "You're talking about taking the fight to them," she said, her voice calm but with an edge of uncertainty. "But we don't even know where their fleet is. The Varkari are a military juggernaut. They have the numbers, the firepower. We're outgunned." "I know," Jace said, his gaze distant as he stared out into the bleak horizon. "But if we wait, we're dead. We need to make the first move, hit them before they can bring in reinforcements. If we let them take ARCS 12, they'll take everything else in their path. We can't afford that." Marcus shook his head, frustration etched into his face. "That's suicide, Jace. You've seen what they're capable of. You know how ruthless they are. The Vanguard is a great ship, but it's just one ship. We don't stand a chance against the Valkyrie fleet. There's more than one ship, Jace replied, his eyes narrowing with determination. We have allies. People who owe us. The Vanguard rose slowly into the sky, its engines cutting through the thick atmosphere of arcs, 12 as it ascended toward the depths of space. Jace stood on the bridge, his mind running through the tactical options. Time was running out. The Valkyrie fleet would be here within hours. But he wouldn't sit idly by while humanity's last chance was crushed underfoot. Commander, we're receiving a transmission, Alina said, her voice breaking through the quiet hum of the ship's engines. She quickly activated the comms panel, and a grainy image appeared on the screen. The face of General Natalie Cartwright, leader of the last remaining human resistance forces on the fringes of Valkyrie-controlled space, appeared. She was a hardened woman, battle-scarred, with eyes that had seen the worst of humanity's wars. I'm listening, Jace said, his voice steady. Commander Hamilton, we've received your message, Cartwright said. Her tone was sharp, but there was a hint of respect in her words. We've been watching the Valkyrie movements in this sector. They've spread thin, but their numbers are still overwhelming. What do you propose? We hit them fast, Jace said without hesitation. We take the fight to them before they can bring in reinforcements. We have one shot at this, Natalie. The Valkyrie can't be allowed to know what's coming. We need to strike hard and fast, cripple their fleet before they can regroup. A brief silence followed, the weight of the proposal sinking in. Are you sure you're ready for this, Hamilton? Cartwright's voice was low, but there was an edge of admiration in her words. The Valkyrie don't just destroy, they annihilate. There's no coming back from this if we fail. Jace's expression hardened, his resolve strengthening. Then we make sure we don't fail. The Vanguard joined up with Cartwright's fleet, a motley collection of ships, mostly improvised and heavily damaged but fiercely determined. The ragtag fleet had survived on the fringes of Valkyrie space, scraping by with guerrilla tactics and sheer willpower. And now, they were about to face the largest force the galaxy had ever seen. Jace paced in front of the bridge, his mind racing through every detail of their plan. They had only one advantage: surprise. The Valkyrie hadn't yet realized that a counterattack was coming. But once they did, all bets were off. Jace needed to be ready for anything. Marcus approached him, his face set with determination. I've got the fleet prepped and ready, Commander. But you know this is a one-way mission. We're not coming back from this. I'm counting on that, Jace replied, his voice calm. We can't afford to leave any survivors for the Valkyrie. If we're going to make a stand, it has to be here. Alina looked over her shoulder, her brow furrowed. I'm detecting Valkyrie ships entering the system. They're still out of range, but they're coming. Jace stepped forward, eyes narrowing. We need to move now. No more delays. It's time. The fleet jumped out of hyperspace, just outside the Valkyrie's defensive perimeter. The first wave of enemy ships came into view, huge, monolithic warships that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. There was no mistaking the size and power of the Valkyrie fleet. But as Jace looked out at the vast armada, his heart beat faster with a fierce, burning resolve. The Valkyrie had underestimated humanity before, and now it was time to show them just how wrong they were. Jace's voice came through the comms, steady and commanding. All ships, engage at maximum speed. We take down their command ships first, disable their ability to coordinate. We're going to blind them. Then we hit their supply lines. No mercy. The fleet surged forward, and the first barrage of fire came from the Valkyrie warships. The Vanguard shook under the impact, but Jace didn't flinch. He kept his eyes on the screen, watching the enemy fleet draw closer. Target their weak spots. Engines, shields, anything we can hit, Marcus shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos of the battlefield. The ships exchanged fire, beams of energy crisscrossing the void, tearing through the fabric of space itself. Jace's hands gripped the edge of the console, his heart pounding in his chest. This wasn't just a battle for survival. This was a statement, a declaration that humanity would not go quietly into the night. The battle raged on, the vanguard cutting through enemy lines with devastating precision. The Valkyrie ships were slow to react, their superior size making them unwieldy in the face of humanity's agile and desperate assault. But then, the unexpected happened. As the Valkyrie fleet began to retaliate with a ferocity that seemed to shake the very stars, a massive explosion tore through the heart of one of their flagship vessels. It was a single ship, a human ship, that had managed to slip through their defenses and deliver a blow that had the Valkyrie reeling. The tide was turning. Humanity was fighting back. Jace's voice came over the comms once more. "Keep pushing, keep the pressure on. We can win this." He was right. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their place in the galaxy, for their future. And no matter the cost, they wouldn't back down. The Valkyrie had underestimated them, and it would be their last mistake. As the first wave of Valkyrie ships began to crumble under the relentless assault, Jace knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. The Valkyrie might be strong, but humanity had something they would never have: the unstoppable, unpredictable will to fight. And as long as there were humans left to fight, the Valkyrie's reign of terror was over. The last of the Valkyrie warships drifted in space, its massive hull crumbling under the relentless barrage from the human fleet. The battle had taken a turn none of the alien invaders had anticipated. Humanity, against all odds, was winning. The galaxy had just witnessed something truly extraordinary. Against the overwhelming might of the Valkyrie, the humans had struck back with the force of a comet, and now the Valkyrie were on the back foot. Commander Jace Hamilton stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, watching the chaos unfold outside. The ship's scanners were lighting up with the aftermath of the attack: broken ships, debris, and an enemy fleet in disarray. They had done it. Against all odds, they had crippled the Valkyrie's advance. But Jace knew better than anyone that a single victory wasn't enough to win the war. The Valkyrie wouldn't just let this slip away. They would retaliate with everything they had. There was still time, but not much. Every second counted. "Status report," Jace ordered, his voice calm but tense. Captain Marcus Vance, standing nearby, checked the consoles. "We've crippled their command ship. Most of their heavy cruisers are out of action, but they're regrouping. We've got maybe half an hour before they can launch a counteroffensive. Their reinforcements should be arriving soon." Jace nodded, his mind already calculating the next steps. The Valkyrie wouldn't give up easily. They never did. And with their fleet in tatters, they would regroup, lick their wounds, and strike again. But they had one thing they didn't: unpredictability. Humanity thrived on the unexpected. Alina Yu, the ship's communications officer, interrupted his thoughts. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission. It's from General Cartwright." Jace's eyes narrowed. "Put it through." The image of General Natalie Cartwright appeared on the screen, looking every bit the seasoned leader she was. Her expression was a mix of pride and wariness. She was a veteran of countless battles, and this victory, as hard-won as it was only a temporary reprieve. "Commander Hamilton," Cartwright began, her voice steady but urgent, "this is far from over. The Valkyrie may have lost a chunk of their fleet, but they've still got reserves. They'll come back at us with everything they have. If they regroup, it'll be a slaughter." Jace's brow furrowed. He knew she was right. The Valkyrie had deep reserves, an endless supply of warships, and their military doctrine was ruthless. This battle might have broken their advance, but it hadn't broken their will. "We'll be ready," Jace replied, his voice resolute. "We've disrupted their command structure for now. We can hit them again, and this time, we hit them harder." Cartwright hesitated before speaking again. "That's not all. I've received intelligence from our spies within the Valkyrie ranks. They're preparing for a counteroffensive larger than anything we've seen. If we don't finish them off now, the reinforcements will flood in. We won't be able to stop them." Jace absorbed the information in silence. They couldn't afford a prolonged engagement. If the Valkyrie brought in more ships, the balance of power would shift back in their favor. They had to act fast. "Understood," Jace said, his tone sharp. We'll take the fight to them again. Make sure all ships are prepared. We'll need every single one of them. The Vanguard turned its course toward the heart of the Valkyrie fleet, its engines pushing the ship to full throttle. The human fleet had inflicted serious damage, but the clock was ticking. The Valkyrie would not stay on the defensive for long. Jace and his crew needed to strike, once more, an all-out assault that would cripple the Valkyrie for good. As they neared the last remaining Valkyrie stronghold in this sector, Jace's thoughts turned inward. He reflected on how far they had come, how the battle had shifted from a desperate defense to a fierce counterattack. This wasn't just about tactics anymore. This was about survival, about proving humanity's place in the universe. The Valkyrie were ruthless, efficient, and organized. But they lacked something that humanity had in spades: resilience. When backed into a corner, when pushed beyond the limits of survival, humans didn't just fight, they adapted. They changed the game. They found a way to win. That's what made them unpredictable. That's what made them dangerous. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace just outside the Valkyrie stronghold, their ships still battered but operational. The final battle was now inevitable. Jace's hands tightened on the console as he prepared for the onslaught. He knew this wasn't just a battle of firepower, it was a battle of willpower. The Valkyrie had their pride, and humanity had their fire. "Commander, we've got incoming," Alina said, her voice tight with urgency. "Valkyrie reinforcements are arriving fast. It's a full fleet." "Damn," Jace muttered, his mind working quickly. "I was hoping we'd have more time." "Set course for their command ship. We're going to hit them where it hurts the most." The fleet surged forward, weapons primed, shields up. The Valkyrie ships came into view, massive, imposing, their armor a patchwork of alien materials designed for maximum intimidation. But despite their size, they were no match for the speed and ferocity of humanity's response. Jace's voice rang out through the comms. "All ships, focus fire on their command vessel. If we can take that out, the rest will crumble." The human fleet roared into action, the first salvo of energy beams lighting up the dark void of space. The Valkyrie retaliated with a wall of fire, but it was too late. The humans had the initiative now. Every ship, every crew member, had been pushed to their absolute limits, and it showed. The fleet moved with precision, targeting the weak spots on the Valkyrie vessels, hitting engines, weapons, and shields. The damage was immediate. "Fire everything we've got," Jace ordered. "No mercy. We finish this now." The Valkyrie fleet faltered. The command ship, once the centerpiece of their strength, began to break apart under the barrage. Its shields flickered, faltered, and then collapsed, allowing humanity's weapons to tear into its hull. The Valkyrie flagship exploded in a brilliant burst of energy, sending shockwaves through the rest of the fleet. "Direct hit," Marcus shouted, his face alight with fierce triumph. "The command ship's gone, Jace. We've done it." But the fight wasn't over yet. Jace knew that the Valkyrie would throw everything they had into one final desperate counterattack. The battle was far from won. Alina's voice interrupted his thoughts. "We've got incoming, more ships, reinforcements. They're coming in fast. This could be it, Commander." Jace's jaw clenched. "We finish what we started. All ships, focus fire on the reinforcements. We're not letting them regroup." The final battle unfolded in a blur of weapons fire and explosions. The human fleet, battered but relentless, pressed the attack with everything they had. The Valkyrie tried to regroup, but it was too late. Their once formidable fleet was crumbling under the might of humanity's offensive. Jace stood at the bridge, his gaze fixed on the view outside, watching the final remnants of the Valkyrie fleet disintegrate before him. Each ship that fell was a victory, but Jace's mind remained focused on the future. The war wasn't over. This battle was only the beginning. But the message had been sent loud and clear to the galaxy. Humanity would never back down. The Valkyrie had learned the hard way. They had underestimated the humans, and that was a mistake they would never make again. The unstoppable force of human resilience, ingenuity, and willpower had proven itself. The galaxy had just witnessed the rise of a new power, a power that could not be extinguished. As the last of the Valkyrie ships fell into the void, Jace allowed himself a brief moment of relief. But even as the crew celebrated their hard-won victory, Jace knew the true battle was just beginning. Humanity had proven that it was here to stay. And no one, not even the Valkyrie, could stop them now.